You're listening to the Word Slinger Podcast, episode 108, Trails of Memories with Angelique L'Amour. This episode of the Word Slinger Podcast is brought to you by the audiobook edition of Quelo Medallion. You can find Quelo Medallion on Audible and use your Audible credit, or get Quelo Medallion for free when you go to audibletrial.com/wordslinger.
It's the Word Slinger Podcast, where story matters. Build your brand. Write your book. Redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented Pants Optional, Kevin Tomlinson, the Word Slinger.
Word Slinger.
Hey everybody, this is Kevin Tomlinson, the Word Slinger. Thanks so much for tuning in again. Now, as you know, I talk to a lot of authors on this show. I've talked to some pretty big names actually in the past, and I'm kind of proud of that. But big name or not, I mean, I love chatting with authors of all stripes. I love talking to indies. I love talking to traditionally published authors. There's some interesting alternatives out there. So, and of course, I talk to people other than authors, but I am an author myself, and so there is this connection that I feel with people who write books for a living. So, and this guest today comes with all sorts of special stories. Now, she's an author in her own right. She's a New York Times best-selling author, but she is also the daughter of a legend in the business, author Louis L'Amour. Now, I grew up with L'Amour books in my home. My grandfather read everything that Louis L'Amour wrote, probably multiple times. And so they were always there. They were always a part of my upbringing. I wasn't particularly a fan of Westerns growing up, but, it's hard to be around somebody who's as enthusiastic about an author and a book as my grandfather was and not pick up a copy and read yourself. And so, I read plenty of Louis L'Amour books growing up. And the interesting thing to me is just how prolific he was as an author. Now, we talk about that and sort of growing up with that legacy in this interview, and I'm thrilled about that. But Angelique herself, Angelique L'Amour, by the way, is the guest on today's show. She is she's such a refreshing personality. She's got this drive, and she has her own tragic stories that she overcame as part of her author journey, which I think is inspiring to all of us. So I'm really glad to have this interview. I'm glad you're tuning in for it. A little bit of housekeeping. I actually have a voicemail now. I have to apologize. Well, I don't know what happened, actually. But I got this voicemail on SpeakPipe, which I encourage you to leave me a message. But for some reason, and maybe there's a limit. Maybe it cuts off at 1:30. I'm not sure. Because it is exactly 1 minute and 30 seconds long, so it got cut off. So I'll be trimming a bit of it. But I want to play this because it's something important to me, and I appreciate the call. So take a listen to this message from Robert Hegwood.
Hello, Kevin. My name is Robert Hegwood. I'm calling in response to your Word Slinger podcast. I'm a regular listener. Enjoy it. Enjoy your guests. I appreciate especially some of your more recent podcasts when you've been open about your Christian faith and your more conservative socio-political values. I mean, I share many of them, I'm sure. And, I'm sort of glad people are not hiding in the shadows so much about it and starting to take stands. I would like to see myself more culturally Christian literary endeavors, whether it's mainstream stuff or genre. One of the best books recently I've read that is written from a Christian perspective, that's not preachy, that's simply culturally Christian, that has a great depth of insight into the human condition, right up there in Dostoevsky's neighborhood, is a Russian novel by Eugene Vodolazkin named Loris. One of the best books I've read in decades. You might enjoy it.
Thanks, Robert, and I will actually check out that book. And I have to apologize to you. You went on in the message to make another point, but it got cut off. So I'm really sorry about that. It may be a limitation of SpeakPipe that is new. It used to not have a time limit, so maybe something got slipped in there. So, a minute 30, everybody, if you'd like to leave a voicemail. Robert, thanks so much. And, I'm very proud and honored, really, by my Christian faith. And I do try very hard not to, push it on people. I don't want to come across as someone who is intolerant of others because they don't share my faith. But it is important to me as a guidepost to my life, and it's a part of everything I do. Everything I do serves God. That's just the way I am. And I know there are plenty of people who don't feel the same way. A lot of my guests do not feel the same way. But one of the beauties of this show is, first of all, it's my platform. I get to talk about what I want. But it is a great way for me to connect with people of different perspectives, different faiths sometimes. I've had Muslim guests. I've had people from all sorts of faiths and all sorts of cultures. And my belief is that God brings us together for specific reasons. That serve him, and whether or not my guests or anyone else shares that belief is fine. It's fine if they don't. But it's an important part of my life, and so I can't help but share it in everything that I do. It's a happy, glorious part of my life. So, of course, I share it. So, anyway, thank you so much for that phone call, that message, actually, Robert. And if you are interested in leaving a message, of course you can. Now, he used the SpeakPipe app on my wordslingerpodcast.com on that website. Man, I'm just stumbling all over the place right now. If you go to wordslingerpodcast.com, you can leave a voicemail from that SpeakPipe app. You can also click on the contact me button, I think it's contact me, and leave a message. In addition to that, you can leave a voicemail the old-fashioned way. All you would have to do is pick up your telephone device and call me at 281-809-WORD. That's 281-809-9673. And you can leave me a voicemail that way as well. So, and I don't know, there may be limitations on that too. So, I've got to sort of settle this whole phone thing someday. There are lots of ways to reach out to me, though. You can also follow me on Twitter at Kevin Tumlinson, and hop on Facebook and just search for me. I have an author page, facebook.com/JKevinTumlinson, long story. And you can also go to facebook.com/Kevin.Tumlinson to follow me on Facebook, friend me or whatever. So lots of ways to get in touch with me. Now, thanks again, Robert, for that voicemail. And let's get to the really important stuff today. We've got a great interview with Angelique Lamore. I know you're going to enjoy it. And stick around, of course, after the interview for a quick wrap-up. And I'll see you there. Hey, everybody. This is, of course, the Word Slinger Podcast, and I'm talking to Angelique Lamore. And if that name sounds familiar, there's going to be a real good reason why here soon. She's a New York Times best-selling author of A Trail of Memories. And among other things, she's got another book out there, too, and we'll discuss all of that. Let's see, that one's called Chemo, Cupcakes, and Carpools, right?
Yes,
okay.
That's the one that came out last summer.
Okay, that's the new one. All right, so we'll be talking about that. So thanks for coming on the show, Angelique.
I'm very happy to be here.
Now, did I butcher your name at all? Because I didn't ask before we started. Did I get the name right all around?
You got it right all around. So as long as you don't pronounce the S in my dad's name, we're good.
Yes, okay, so that's where I want to hop on, because you are the daughter of a very famous author, Louis L'Amour. Not Louis L'Amour.
No, Louis.
Louis L'Amour. And, I grew up reading your father's books, actually. And my grandfather got me into them. My grandfather was a huge Louis L'Amour fan, owned every book he could get his hands on. I grew up reading his work, so we all owe your father a great debt, I think.
Well, I'm just going to shamelessly pitch here. There are new books coming out. There have been new books coming out since he passed away. So there may be things you haven't read.
Okay.
But I did wonder when you used the word wordslinger for your podcast if you might be a little aware of him.
Of course. I grew up in South Texas. There's no way not to be aware of Louis L'Amour. So, in that, let's talk about that, and then I definitely want to get to Chemo, Cupcakes, and Carpools, since that's your newest book. And I'm going to apologize because my dog has picked this exact time to frolic and play with my feet. And so you may be hearing her scuffling around.
Well, I can guarantee that at some point during this conversation, my dog's going to bark at some dog walking by on the road. So I'm going to apologize in advance, and to everyone who's listening, occasionally that I have to deal with.
Okay. Now we got the dogs out of the way. All right. So, so many questions to ask you. I'll try to keep everything kind of calm and cool, but clearly your father must have had some influence on your career since you decided you would be an author as well. So what was it like growing up in a household with a writer?
It was fascinating. Dad was I didn't know any different. My dad was very normal. My dad got up in the morning and had breakfast with us and would usually read to us at the breakfast table, and whatever he was reading, not kids' books. I mean, it could be a journal, it could be a biography, it could be a novel. It just really depended on whatever he felt like reading. And then we'd go off to school and he'd go in the next room and write. Yeah. And he wrote all day long. There's one way to get 130 books published, and that is how you do it. There are 365 days a year. But he was also very open with both my brother and I in that we could come say hello to him. We didn't abuse the privilege, but we never felt like, Dad was writing, we had to be silent, or Dad was writing, the doors were closed, and it wasn't a prohibitive place. It was a very open place, and he worked out every day. And in my adult life, having children of my own, I realized he worked out every day at 3:00 so that when we got home from school, we weren't interrupting his writing if we came to hang out with him for a little bit. And, we talked to him, and he'd be punching a heavy bag, and he'd be jumping rope, and he'd be lifting weights, and we'd chat with him then. But, and then our trips were always formed around where he needed to go for research, and usually some public appearances or some autographings, things like that would go on as well. He usually did one big publicity tour in the beginning of the summer. As I got older, it always seemed to be June. It always seemed to be May, June, like Father's Day, pre-Father's Day, where he'd go, and he had a rather famous PR trip that Bantam, now Penguin Random House, would set up for him, and he was kind of legendary in the book business as a L'Amour book tour, which was 7:00 in the morning till 8:00 at night, 8 to 10 personal appearances a day, and something like, 40 cities in 30 days. It wasn't quite that intense, but it was pretty. He was gone for a month, because if he could go for a month or 3 weeks and do it, and then not have to do it as intensely, he got more writing time.
Right. That's a grueling schedule.
It was a grueling schedule, and when A Trail of Memories was coming out, he took me aside, and he was not very well at that moment. He passed away during my book tour, but he sat me down and he said, "Okay, you're going to be just fine at this. You can handle this. I know you're going to be great at it, but I have one word of advice." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Orange juice. Whenever they offer you something to drink, you get orange juice." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because it keeps your sugar up.
Yeah. And
you won't fall asleep, and you won't get tired, and you won't get cranky, and you won't get, you'll just stay energized." And I thought, this is my dad's words of advice on my book tour, was orange juice.
Right. Hey, that's good advice.
But we grew up being very respectful and grateful for the readers and for their sort of contributions to our lives, because they were our lives. They paid for everything through Dad writing the books, and the wholesalers as well. At that time, the wholesalers were your most important allies, because they were the people who got the books in the stores.
Yeah.
And, at that point, indie writing was nothing. And as even towards the end of his life, it was known as vanity press. And it was usually done by people who didn't write well enough to get published. I mean, that was the opinion. It's completely changed now. But at that time, someone to self-publish a book meant they were doing it for their company with in-house, or they were doing it because they couldn't get published.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It has changed. I think we still kind of face that stigma a little.
I think that's changing. We can talk about that too. I think that's changed a lot. But you asked about his influence on my writing, and I would say that when I was newly married, I went to hear this woman speak, and I don't even know where I was that I heard her speak. And she said, "What you were doing at 7 is what you should be doing." And I thought, and I'm sitting there, and I'm an actress, right? And I'm spending all this time in classes. I'm going on all these auditions. I'm doing plays. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm writing songs. I'm recording demo tapes. I'm doing all this, performing artist stuff. And I'm thinking, man, at 7 I was writing.
Yeah.
I was writing poetry, and I was writing short stories, and I went through high school with 2 notebooks open on my desk, the one for notes for school and the one that I was writing whatever song was in my head.
Right.
So that stopped me cold, and I had to go, wait a second. Not that I'm going to abandon this whole thing, but I was slowly aging out of acting to a certain extent, especially in Los Angeles at that time.
Right.
If you were over 28, you were a has-been and you hadn't even started. So I sat in acting class the next night, and I wrote down a sentence of every book I wanted to write. Like I thought about ever writing, and there were 23 of them. And I thought, man, if I need to start, because I don't really know what I'm doing, but I sort of know what I'm doing. And I would say that, Dad's best piece of advice was always, grab him with the first sentence.
Right. That's legendary advice. So
exactly.
So so there is that obvious, 800-pound gorilla in the room for your career, but I don't want to, you've got a pretty eclectic career beyond that. You were an actress. You got to I'm struggling to find the right way to phrase it. So
I've had a very diverse number of careers,
right?
And along with parenthood and being a wife, so it's all the wife and mother is in there, the cancer survivor is in there, and the philanthropist is in there, and to really throw you for a loop, I did have a short term making cheesecakes for La Caja Fole in Los Angeles in 1983, 84, 85, where it was a female impersonator nightclub.
Very cool. That is a cool side to your career. That's very cool.
Somebody says, "What is the oddest job you've had?" I'm going to say, yeah, that's kind of it.
Right. Yeah, I can see it. So you brought up the cancer survivor, and that leads us to your newest book, which is Chemo, Cupcakes, and Carpools. That's a nice alliteration, by the way. So tell me a little bit about that journey. I mean, that had to be a scary time in your life for sure, but it looks like you're building something positive out of it.
Well, it's an interesting thing. I was, my kids were little, and my dog wants to go out. My kids were little, and I was writing. I was working very diligently on a novel, and I had been working a middle grade fiction piece, and I had been working with an editor at Penguin, actually, who was helping me a lot and had sort of redirected the book, and I was very intensely working on it, and all of a sudden I have this cancer diagnosis, and my lead character in that was going through her own trauma, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't live it in fiction and life at the same time. It was like I was dealing with enough, and my main focus was to help my kids deal with what was happening to our family. Right. And I was very clear-headed about that. I knew that however I took this and however I dealt with this was going to inform them for the rest of their lives, whether they got, dumped by their boyfriend the night before prom, or they missed out on a promotion, or they got sick, or they, broke their leg, or, as what happened. I wanted them to see me rise above it, and I wanted them to see that life continued and that we still had fun and they still got to do what they wanted to do, and that as much as life had to sort of focus on me for a change and had to be they weren't taking a back seat to their importance in my life. It was just we had to add this sort of calendar to our calendar that was my treatments and my surgeries and my setbacks. And so I started a blog, and the blog at that time was called My Story Right Now. It's now on my website, which is angeliquelamore.com. But I started writing it because I needed to keep clear on what I was going through, and I needed to keep my head happy. And I have always written, I've always kept a journal that expressed how I was feeling and what I was going through. And I knew I could help people beyond my own circle.
Right.
If I wrote it down. I also knew that I wanted to keep aware of how I felt each time so that I would maybe progressively manage symptoms better as time went by. And I also didn't have to do a group email and then like BCC my two relatively famous friends so that they weren't on a group email with everybody. I thought, you know what, I'm doing a blog and everybody can come to the blog if they want to know how I'm feeling.
Right.
And nobody has to ask me, or they don't have to ask my mom. They can just come. And so I started that, and I kept getting these emails from friends. Oh, my friend this. Oh, I'm this. And I would write these long emails telling them how I dealt with this and how I dealt with that and how I told my kids and how I dealt with side effects and how I dealt with work and how I dealt with all these different aspects, because I was teaching at the time. That was good. I was teaching 6th grade creative writing and literature, and had created the creative writing program myself. So I was really excited to do it, but I was doing it during chemo. And at the end of sort of the most intense period, I knew I was writing a book, and I knew I was going to write a book. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine who was also my publicist on Trail of Memories, and she was at that time head of Random House. She was the vice president of PR at Random House. And she said, don't write a blog book.
Okay.
And I thought, what is she? She said, some people, they just take their blog posts, they put them in a book, don't do that.
Yeah.
I said, okay. And then she said, you need to write The Girlfriend's Guide to Chemo, you know, like those books we read when we were pregnant. And I'm like, okay. But it wasn't the whole picture for me, because I had another friend who was saying, I wish I could bottle your attitude. I want to give it to some friends of mine. And I tried to write the whole project together. I tried to write sort of my spiritual self-help journey and all the helpful hints. And the helpful hints kept making the self-help spiritual journey bottle of attitude thing clunky.
Yeah.
And I knew I was a better writer. And I realized I was trying to please myself and her, and I didn't want to do that. Right. I wanted it to be separate. And in the middle of the time, I was kind of going, well, should I just pull it all out and see what it looks like? I had another friend get diagnosed. And and the woman who was advising me had gotten diagnosed. So, and I knew I was helping people. And I thought, boy, before somebody else gets diagnosed, I am putting this together in a book form. And I know that there's probably no publisher that's going to look at an 80-page book and go, oh, yeah, we want that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you just look at breast cancer survivors, there are 240,000 of us every year. So there is an audience.
Right.
And that's just breast cancer. That's not every kind of cancer. And that's not every parent, male or female, struck by cancer, raising their kids at the same time.
Right.
And even one of my friends who had a 17-year-old, she was like, what kind of help am I going to need? And I said, is your daughter driving? And she said, yes. I said, you're not going to need help. It would be really nice if somebody would clean your house, you know, because you're going to be able to take care of you. She's old enough to understand that you're going to have a period of time where you feel like crap, and then the rest of the time you're going to be kind of okay. Mm-hmm. But, you know, my kids were 7 and 11. It was a very different household. I know people dealing with infants. I know women now who were pregnant when they were diagnosed, went through chemo, pregnant.
Wow.
Or delivered early, and those women I can't even touch. So I put together this book and thought I'm gonna self-publish it. I took a class online that taught me something. It's the only class I've paid for so far, and it was by a woman named Kristen Joy, and she does this thing called Kindle in 30.
Okay.
She does a lot of things about self-publishing, but that's the one I took. And that really kind of got me geared up for, like, got me to throw Chemo, Cupcakes, and Carpools together, hire an editor after the first of this year, hire a line editor. I went and found I knew what I wanted on the cover. The cover's a line drawing for people who can't see it. It's a line drawing of a family, and I knew exactly what I wanted, so I went to children'sillustrator.com and found an illustrator who didn't make scary-looking parents. And I was really looking for rounded, not angular. I was very, very serious about it looking happy and positive.
Right.
Because my whole goal was to not write the scary cancer book, either of them.
Right.
I don't want to write the scary cancer book, and the other book that I'm working with an editor very seriously on right now is a positive book, and I want it to be, and it is more than just good for someone with cancer. It's got a larger perspective. But this one is just really helpful. And it's everything that I put in every email and every question that came back to me from friends of friends were like, well, how did you do this? How did you do that? And it's very short and sweet. And I'm publishing a workbook kind of guide to it after the first of the year. That's going to be a place for you to write down all the stuff that you have in your head. Cool. Because that's the one thing is, like, who likes more peanut butter than jelly on their sandwich when dad's making the sandwiches and it's usually mom and she's got it in her head. It's a place for all that stuff to go.
Yeah.
For someone going through it. So that was the germination and expression of it. And I'm really grateful. I'd love it to get more publicity simply because I have enough into it that I haven't made any money yet, but I just want people to know because I think it's helpful. I really think it's helpful.
Yeah. I want to read the subtitle now, actually, because I think it says a lot. Because the subtitle is "How to Go Through Chemo with Your Family, Your Marriage, and Your Sanity Intact," which I think is exactly the point you're making right now. But I know several people who are going through chemo right now. And it's a very scary time, and it seems like everything just goes wrong all at once. There's a whole weight that comes down on you all the time.
Yeah, and you're asked to make a lot of decisions instantaneously, right. and they're not sort of like, well, do you want to go see this movie or that movie? Do you want to live or die kind of question. Right. Are you going to take tamoxifen or are you not going to take tamoxifen? If you don't take tamoxifen, which is an after chemo or before, a lot of people are on it who are BRCA positive. It's a medication, a pill that you take, and if you make that choice one way or the other, is it going to mean life or death? Everything's life and death. Your whole life, you're like going, oh, I'm going to go to the market today, or I'm going to take my kids to the park. You're not thinking, am I going to make the wrong decision and my life is going to be over within the next 5 years? And that's the weight that is on a cancer survivor. And, I have a friend who's a doctor, and she says, I consider anybody a cancer survivor who's heard the words, you have cancer. Yeah. That second, you are a cancer survivor. So that's why I'm using that term as opposed to in treatment and, in the tunnel, as we called it in our house, just doing what's next. But, a lot of things do go wrong. And I didn't want my kids to be scared of it. There's a lot of, I grew up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. In the 70s, there were a lot of women in turbans and a lot of TV movies that were being made that were terrifying, that made it look really scary, and everybody died, because it's not good drama.
Right.
So you're kind of going, well, I have a friend with pancreatic who finally started searching for a doctor who had patients who lived past 5 years because she'd been diagnosed early, and she's like, everybody dies. I want to meet somebody who hasn't. Right. So it's that. I mean, if when you look through it, it's like, talks about what support, what can your friends do, what should you do before treatment begins, what kind of help do you need, how do I volunteer at school, how do I remember things? That's the chapter called Why Did I Start Burning the Pancakes? Right.
That's great. I love, by the way, that you chose to go this route with the book, because Anytime I've ever seen anything about dealing with cancer in general, it is always very dire. It just sort of adds to the weight, most of the time.
It's an interesting. I mean, I was funny because I sent a Facebook message to the Kindle in 30 to the woman who runs it, Kristen Joy, and I just said, "What happens if I don't have a niche? I don't have a category, because I don't have a category, because every book that you could say is similar is written by either a patient or a patient and a doctor or a doctor,
right?
And it starts with, what kind of chemo am I taking? What are my options for breast reconstruction? What am I, it's not. I describe this as a nuts and bolts guide to basically your life during this time.
Right.
It's not about, do I make this choice or that choice? It's how do I get from A to B? How do I get my kids to soccer?
Right.
How do I tell people? How do I talk to the kids about them? And my kids were at very different stages at this, at that point. 7 and 11 is a huge 4-year difference. And my 11-year-old had a friend, a classmate, a set of twins, a boy-girl twins, whose mother had cancer and had it come back a couple of times. So she was more aware than my 7-year-old. My 7-year-old didn't really understand too much.
Yeah.
Except that she couldn't, give me a bear hug after my surgery for a while.
Yeah. That's got to be rough too.
That was rough. That was rough on both of us.
Yeah. Because when you're going through that kind of pain and misery for that long, a bear hug would be pretty nice.
It would be pretty nice, not right away.
That's
my biggest piece of advice. I had a friend come over and she's like, I'm going to go see my girlfriend. She had her mastectomy 2 weeks ago. I'm like, don't hug her. Yeah. She's like, what? I said, you can put your arms on her shoulders or your hands on her shoulders. Let her pull you in. Do not pull her in.
Right. Don't hug her and drink orange juice. These are the two pieces of advice we've gotten on the show so far.
I had a very young, enthusiastic mother. My surgery was on October 9th, and October 31st, there was the Halloween parade at school.
Yeah.
And, everybody's still in grade school at this point, so we're all there. And this beautiful young woman comes running over to me to give me a hug, and she grabs me, and she knew that I had a mastectomy, a double, and she knew that I had, when I'd had my surgery, and she gave me this massive hug, and I was in so much pain, I couldn't speak, and I couldn't, get away from her because I was, frozen, and finally she let go, and I was like, thank God. Thank you. And I never said anything to her about it because I knew, it would just upset her and she would have felt so bad, But I was like, that's my big piece of advice. In fact, I wanted to have an entire page in this book, but I didn't end up doing it, that just said, do not give the cancer patient, the mastectomy patient, a bear hug. Yeah. And just over and over and over and over again.
It's just not something you think about. And how bad would she feel if she knew?
She would have felt horrible and probably equal to the pain that I was in. Right. So, I let that go. Some people become very uncomfortable. Some people can't talk to you after a diagnosis. Some people feel like it's catching. Right. I had a neighbor who didn't speak to me for 6 years.
Yeah. So, okay, I want to, because we'll be running out of time soon, so I want to get to this because you've now had the experience of traditional publishing versus indie publishing, and I kind of want to look at the comparison and contrast to that a little bit. I mean, what made you decide you wanted to indie publish this book?
I'm going to answer your question in exactly 5 seconds. I have to let my dog out.
Okay.
That's life in my house.
That's no problem at all. That's life. I'm starting to experience that more myself.
Okay. So the main reason was I didn't think I could get it published. I thought that, I grew up in the publishing business. So right. People say, well, you grew up with a writer. I grew up with a writer, but we talked about publishing a lot. Right. And we went back, and I knew all the bigwigs at Bantam when it was Bantam. It's now morphed into Penguin Random House. But yeah. When I was a young kid growing up, the people that I knew because of Dad, Oscar Distel and Mark Jaffe and Saul David, were all sort of the titans of industry. Ian Ballantyne, the man who started the paperback novel. Yeah. I knew all these people, so I was around it. And so it's kind of like growing up, with your dad in a particular industry. You learn the industry if you have the conversations and the conversation is open, and it was. And we talked about publicity. We talked about book publishing. We talked about cover art. I mean, Dad would talk about coming up with titles, and sometimes he knew the minute he started the book what it was going to be called, and sometimes it would be like, yeah, I don't have it yet. And so we were all part of the process. Who do you dedicate the book to? And, why did he choose to dedicate this one to this person and this one to that person? And it was all a part of our growing up. So knowing that it was so short, because it was really a guidebook, I didn't think that anybody would publish it. And if they were going to publish it, they were going to say, we want the bigger book. And then it would be another year and a half.
Yeah.
And also to publish, the turnaround time is better now, but it used to be like I turned in A Trail of Memories in April of '87 and it came out June of '88.
Yeah.
So it was a full year. It used to be a full year, maybe 14 months. And part of that was just getting it all, nothing was instantaneous. Nothing was on computer.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a compact computer the size of a, like big old fashioned hard drive. The ones that are, I don't even know what they're the size of, bigger than a bread box. And so I thought, I just want it in the hands of people.
Right. And
I'm connected with a lot of people on Twitter now through a chat that goes on Monday nights for mostly for breast cancer survivors. And I'm meeting doctors and meeting more doctors, so I started telling them about doctors and telling them about telling the doctors about the books and saying, this is what's going on and that's what's going on, and would you put it in your office? Would you tell your patients? I'm not trying to get you to buy the book, but would you just tell people about it? And my plastic surgeon, my breast surgeon, my OBGYN, another breast surgeon, they all have copies in their offices, and they have these little cards. So the information can get picked up by the students.
Right.
I'm sorry, my daughter just texted me, by the patients. And I just really didn't think that anybody was going to go for it.
Right.
So I also wasn't, so I thought, well, I'm going to take this one, and I'm considering self-publishing the next one as well, though that's a much longer book. It'll be maybe 200 pages, and it's more in depth, and it's got, more information, more weight. It's a braided narrative about my life and my lessons. But I think about doing that one both ways. Mm-hmm. And I can't really decide. And so one day when I was trying to decide, I threw an email query out to an agent that I searched for and did some research into, and I found an agent, and I just sort of sent it cold. Mm-hmm. Okay? Yeah. And I got an immediate response, can we have the first 50?
Okay.
And because of that, they weren't interested in it in its form in the way it was. They had some suggestions to me, which were kind of interesting, but I got read.
Right.
And then I got read again. So I thought, well, obviously, either my query is really amazing, or it's my query, my family history, and my New York Times bestseller, thing that I get to write after everything. But somehow I got read. And that was really encouraging. So I started thinking about it. And so when I did the class, that Kindle in 30 class, because I thought, well, I'm going to kind of go to grad school on chemo, cupcakes, and carpools and learn how to self-publish.
Right.
And see what it takes, what kind of money it takes, what kind of everything it takes, just so that I can make that decision when the time comes.
Yeah.
And see if I want to go after a big publisher. And I need to be, I want to be cautious about where I go and who I choose and all of that. So I'm still in the mix with that one. So this one, I just felt like I wish I had more publicity. I wish I had, a spare $20,000 that I could throw at it publicity wise.
Right. Yeah. No, we are.
but I don't.
Right.
And so I'm looking I'm looking towards the future and kind of trying to decide. I think that I will be a mixed publisher. I will be a hybrid published person at some point.
Right.
And that's the thing that I had. That's the thing that the conversation that I had when I was back meeting at Penguin Random House this fall. We were there about Dad's stuff, and I was talking to an editor, and she said, it's really interesting for us, all the self-publishing. She said, I'm now doing something called hybrid publishing. I have a couple of authors that have incredible, they have great sales.
Yeah.
They have great sales. They have great platforms. They're selling, they have a list of 100,000 people, whatever it is, but they've got a lot of credit that way, and they've got a quality product. And she said, so I talked to them about publishing, and they say, oh, let's do a book. And she said, the thing is that they don't think the rules apply to them,
Right.
which is fantastic. She said, I'm learning so much about just sort of throwing a lot of things that were preconceived ideas
Mm-hmm.
out. And she said, but at the same time, I have to explain to them that if we're going to put money and energy and time behind a book, they can't publish within a certain time frame on either side. They can't self-publish a book 2 weeks before or a month before. And I don't remember what she said her time frame was on either side, because she said, we're putting money into it, we're putting energy into it, and we don't want to defeat the market.
Right.
We don't want somebody going, oh, well, I just got a book from her.
Yeah.
And she's dealing with romance writers, but I think there's somebody else there who's hybrid publishing. I think she said thrillers or detective mysteries, something like that. Another kind of really strong genre fiction that has great following.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. And I said, are other publishers doing it? She said, I don't know. I don't think so. She said, I'm still hearing. She said, there's this stigma. And she said, and then on top of that, people are like going, what are we going to do about these people? But they're not embracing it. And I'm really trying to embrace it. Because I think it feeds everything. It feeds their book to us, and it feeds their list as well. So it's kind of a really good thing. She said, but it's only ebook. They're not publishing hardcover. They're publishing only in e when they do that.
Right.
And so that part's less of a financial risk for them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's ebooks actually, I think, are taking more market share too. Not taking, they just enjoying a large market share, I guess. So I think it's a safer bet when you roll it out that way. So, well, we've busted through the 30 minutes I told you it would take, and so I want to make sure I'm respecting your time here. But this has been fascinating, and I applaud you for what you've gone through and how you've come out of it and how you're helping others with it. I think that's amazing. So congratulations on that, and I hope this book does very well. It's interesting. You have, of course, an interesting history with your father and everything, but to see how you're pulling all this together, I'm just kind of amazed by it. So, thank you for being who you are.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's I think it's the family business. I write, my brother writes, my father wrote, his 2 sisters and 2 brothers wrote. I mean, it's kind of going down through the ages.
Yeah. That's
so
cool.
I think that is it seems to be something that is just inherently in us to be storytellers. Right.
And I can definitely think of worse legacies than Louis L'Amour. So
I can't do it. It was an amazing way to grow up. He was a very generous person and a very kind person and an amazing storyteller. So it was never we were not bored.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you being on. And for everyone out there listening, I hope you enjoyed this interview and stick around for the wrap up at the end. So thanks again, Angelique. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate you inviting me. Thank you.
You got it. All right.
Okay.
Hang out, everyone, and we'll talk to you in just a second. And that second is now. The magic of radio, everyone. So that was Angelique Lamore, daughter of Louis Lamore, of course. We can't emphasize that enough, I guess. And it's a curious thing. I can only imagine what it was like to grow up in a household with someone who was writing and was so prolific about it. I mean, there are still new books coming out today, years and years after Louis has passed. So I can only imagine what that's like. My own father is an author. Of course, I did not know that. I didn't meet him until I was 38 years old. So, odd little coincidence that we both went that route. And he writes westerns, of course. He's writing a science fiction book right now, which I can't wait to read. But it's kind of interesting how it sort of gets into the blood, even when you don't know about it. So, great to talk to a legacy. And, of course, everything you heard about, if you want to find her website, her books, her Twitter handle, anything that you are interested in, you can find all of that in the show notes. Make it nice and easy for you. So be sure to click over there. Beyond the interview and everything else, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you, tuning in each week and listening and supporting the show. If you do want to support the show, help it continue. Also to reach new people, including new guests. But anyone listening to the show, I consider part of a flock. People that I'm helping in some way. Sharing the stories of these guests, it's just powerful. It changes me every time I talk to anybody. Every time I interview someone for this show, there's this change that happens within me, a new perspective, a bit of growth that makes me someone more than I was. And I want to provide that for my listeners. Now, you can help with that, and here's a couple of ways. Number one, if you want to help financially, it's easy enough. Just go to wordslinger.com and click on the Patreon button. I had an interesting encounter with someone the other day. I was talking to another content producer, and the topic of Patreon came up, and they said that they'd gotten some blowback from people who consider it begging. I would like to encourage you to change your perspective on that if you are someone who believes that. And here's why. Many times we're out here creating this content with no real incentive other than we just care, which is exactly what this person does. Now, this is part of their living. Patreon is just a way for their viewers, because he has a YouTube channel. It's just a way for his viewers to continue to support the content that they love. That's not begging. I mean, that's offering everyone a chance to participate in creating something that helps them. It's sort of in your self-interest to do that. So if that is your perspective on it, I mean, I suppose I understand it. I really don't, honestly. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't understand that. That's to me, a very short-sighted perspective. But whatever. But you are, of course, entitled to do whatever you like. And if you would like to support this show financially, I do have a Patreon account. So click on that on wordslingerpodcast.com. Every dollar helps, and I appreciate it. I'm very grateful for it. Beyond that, you can support the show and help others discover it by rating and ranking it on iTunes. If you go to iTunes, search for Word Slinger Podcast, you'll find it. It's there. It has my picture and everything. Although I'm having trouble getting it to change the cover art for it. For some reason, it won't pick up the new cover art. But whatever. Problems, whatever. But if you'll go and find the show, regardless of what it looks like, and leave a review, 4 or 5 stars would be awesome. I do appreciate that. And if you write something nice, maybe something you've learned from the show or the thing you appreciate most, that would be very helpful, and I'd be very grateful for it. So thank you for that support. And of course, another way to support the show is to simply reach out to me. I can't tell you how grateful I am when I hear from people who love the show, like Robert from earlier when you heard his voicemail, and whatever your perspectives happen to be, that I support all perspectives mostly. I mean, there are times there are things people say and do that, well, frankly, I make me cringe. I don't know, but people are people. But I appreciate you reaching out and saying hello and telling me how much you enjoyed a guest, or what you may have learned, or anything that you appreciate about the show. I'm very grateful for that. So you can do that, and the easiest way to do that, of course, go to wordslingerpodcast.com. You can click the contact button. It is contact, not contact me or us or anything. I don't know what I was thinking. Click the contact button and leave me an email right from there. Or you can click on the send voicemail tab that's right on the right hand side of the screen. Apparently that has a minute 30 limitation, which I'm only just now learning about. I swear to you, it was longer before. I've gotten longer voicemails through there before. And you can also call me on your telephone device. Call me at 281-809-WORD. That's 281-809-9673, where you can leave me a voicemail, I assume, of greater length than a minute 30, but just to be cautious, keep them short, I guess. That's a bummer. Actually, any way you want to reach out to me is fine. And if you'd like something, if you write to me and you'd like it read on air, I am okay with that. But I love playing voicemails on air. I just love doing that. So feel free to send that along. Other things, housekeeping-wise, well, there's a lot going on in the Word Slinger universe right now. I do have another book that is nearing completion. Got a little delayed due to conferences and getting sick and that sort of thing. The woes of the writer's life. But I'm enjoying this book. I'm wrapping up my Sawyer Jackson series. The final volume will be done soon. It's been a little too long in coming. I took a little detour there and wrote some thrillers and a couple other books in between. So it's taken a little longer to finish that series than it really should have, and I feel a little bad about that, because readers, you as readers, if you are a reader of that series, you deserve to see the final product as soon as it can be available. So I apologize for the delay on that, but I'll have it. After that, I've got a few more books on the board that I'm going to be diving right into. I have an opportunity. I did submit something to the James Patterson Masterclass competition, and it seems that things are going decent enough. I'll let you know if I am selected. But that would be cool. If you are of the praying type, I would appreciate some prayers in that direction, because I would love to get this deal. This would be a great opportunity for me, and the gist of it is, if my concept, basically I wrote sort of a, well, what would I call that? Like a log line, really. I broke down the plot into a paragraph or so, and then I wrote a scene, a chapter, I guess, of 1,000 words, and submitted that, and I feel really good about it. I feel like it's really good work. So that the competition is to win an opportunity to co-author that book with James Patterson. I have a great indie author career. I love my career. I'm doing very well. Pretty happy with what has transpired. But I see this as a new challenge, something new I can tackle. I see it as a boost. I think it'll boost my author career. So I'm excited about it. So if you are of the praying variety, I would appreciate prayers on that, and any other well wishes, good vibes, whatever is appropriate to you. I appreciate it. I'm very grateful. So thank you for that. I'm hoping that comes to something. Even if I don't win the competition, I still feel like it came to something. I'm grateful for even being able to do it, because I think it's opened my mind to some possibilities I wasn't really considering before. So always good to do that. And otherwise, on the RV front, not ready to fully announce this yet. I did tease this last episode, but there has been there's been a change in plan, and I think you're going to dig what we have come to, because we had when we set out on this, we had a specific goal in mind for this RV life, and a couple of things kind of locked up, didn't happen exactly the way they should have, didn't turn out the way we planned, and we were prepared for that, believe it or not, because that's the way life works, right? Sometimes you decide you're going to go one direction, and life says, "No, that route's closed." So, but we have something new in the works. I know I'm teasing it, but the reason I'm teasing it is because I'm very excited about it. I can't wait to announce it to you, and I really think you're gonna love what we're doing. So, stay tuned for that. Stick around for that, and it's an open loop, folks. I'm telling you, marketing, it's in the blood. And on the Draft to Digital front, I hope you'll continue to pay attention to Draft to Digital. If you are a will-be author or you are an author, there's a lot of stuff brewing at Draft to Digital. So check out drafttodigital.com. Make sure you are signing up for an account there. It's free. Doesn't cost you anything. You don't even have to publish through us if you don't want to. But if you hop in, you're going to start seeing some cool stuff happening. So I highly recommend it. Check out the universal book links in particular at books2read.com. And that's pretty much it. I'm just going to go ahead and wind this up. Thanks again for tuning in. As always, I appreciate you being here. My best to you. I love each and every one of you. God bless you in what you're doing. I hope you have nothing but success, joy. I hope that all good things come to you. And I will see you next week.
Word Slinger.